The courtroom felt impossibly cold that morning, a sterile air conditioning hum that seemed to amplify every small sound, the shuffle of papers, the scrape of shoes against linoleum, the faint tapping of fingers on desks. Detective Mark Harlan, a veteran of violent crimes and countless trials, leaned back in his chair, adjusting his tie and rubbing a tired hand over his face. He had never seen anything like this case, and certainly never thought he would. A 3-year-old girl was about to testify in one of the most high-profile abduction cases in the county's history. The room smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, but beneath it, a tension as thick as fog hovered. At the center of it all sat Lily Carter, her small frame dwarfed by the oversized chair that barely contained her. Her bright yellow dress seemed almost too cheerful for the gravity of the moment, the skirt of it fluttering slightly with every subtle movement she made. She clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit to her chest, the white fur frayed from countless nights of hugs and tears. Her mother, Claire Carter, sat close beside her, hands tightly clasped around Lily's, offering quiet reassurances that she barely needed. The child's steel-like determination already radiated from her tiny body. The gallery was packed. Journalists jostled for position, cameras poised, flashes ready to capture every second. Family members whispered nervously among themselves. The public seats were full, filled with neighbors, curious onlookers, and supporters of the Carter family, all drawn by the story that had gripped the county for over 3 years. The disappearance of Lily's father, a local contractor who had vanished without a trace. No ransom note, no struggle, no clear evidence. Only questions. Only rumors. And now, in the most unexpected twist, a toddler might hold the key. The judge, a stern woman with sharp gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses, peered over the bench at the tiny girl. "Do you understand why you are here, young lady?" she asked, her voice calm but authoritative, carrying across the quiet room. Lily's lower lip trembled. She blinked rapidly, scanning the faces that towered above her. The lawyer's notes, the bailiff's polished shoes, the rows of onlookers, they all seemed enormous, overwhelming. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she nodded. The bailiff cleared his throat. "Your Honor, may I bring in the K-9?" A murmur ran through the courtroom. Some of the parents in the gallery instinctively covered their children's eyes. Detective Harlan's stomach knotted. K-9 Ranger was no ordinary police dog. The German Shepherd had decades of combined experience with his handler, a reputation for sniffing out narcotics, explosives, and, more importantly, tracking human scents with uncanny accuracy. Ranger was disciplined, loyal, and predictable, except perhaps when it came to Lily Carter. The courtroom doors opened, and Ranger entered with his handler. The dog's presence alone seemed to draw the air tight around the girl, compressing it, thickening the tension until even the smallest movement seemed amplified. Lily froze instantly. Her tiny hands tightened around her rabbit, and her eyes locked on Ranger. Detective Harlan leaned forward, nodding the way Ranger's ears twitched in acknowledgement. He had handled the dog dozens of times during the investigation, but never had he seen the intensity of focus Ranger displayed now. Something about the child, or perhaps something on her, was drawing the dog's attention. The lawyers whispered back and forth, voices hushed but tense. "Do we even allow a toddler to interact with a K-9?" one asked. "We don't have a choice," the prosecutor replied, tension lacing her tone. "This child claims she saw something the night her father disappeared. The K-9's role is central. If he responds, it could make or break the case." The judge raised a hand. "Quiet in the court. We proceed at my discretion." Ranger stopped a few feet away from Lily, sitting obediently at his handler's side. The dog's posture was calm, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the girl as if reading her thoughts. Lily blinked rapidly and then, without a hint of hesitation, lifted her tiny finger and pointed directly at him. The room went silent, a pin-drop stillness that made the air seem impossibly heavy. Detective Harlan's hand went to his mouth. He had seen K-9s respond to human commands, to sense, to training, but never like this. Ranger's eyes didn't move. He didn't react immediately. He simply stared, head tilted slightly, and then slowly, deliberately lifted his paw. A shiver ran through the courtroom. The prosecution whispered urgently to the judge, urging caution. "Your Honor, the child she's pointing at the dog, but I don't think she's identifying him as a threat. She's what?" the judge demanded, raising an eyebrow. "Sir, ma'am, I'm not sure," the prosecutor admitted, voice shaking slightly. "The dog, he's reacting to something in her hand. Or no, not her hand, her direction. I can't explain it yet." Lily's mother's hands were trembling, gripping her daughter's tiny shoulders. "Be brave, baby," she whispered softly, almost under her breath. Lily's lips moved, forming words too quiet for anyone to hear. The defense attorney stood abruptly. "Objection. This is highly irregular. A toddler cannot testify meaningfully in a case of this magnitude." The judge raised a hand to silence him. "We proceed. Sit down, we will see what she has to say." Lily took a small breath, puffing her chest out as if summoning courage from some invisible well deep inside her. She stepped forward slightly, bringing the stuffed rabbit closer to her face for comfort. Then she looked directly at Ranger. Her eyes were wide but focused, unflinching. She whispered 2 words. "Bad man." The courtroom collectively froze. The prosecutor's pen hovered over a legal pad. The defense attorney's face turned pale. The judge leaned forward, her glasses catching the glare of the overhead lights. Detective Harlan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had seen confessions, threats, and outbursts, but never had a 3-year-old spoken with such clarity, such precision, at the exact moment it mattered most. Ranger, as if understanding every syllable, growled low in his throat, a warning that sent a ripple through the crowd. The handler stiffened, his knuckles whitening on the leash. Every adult in the room was processing what they had just heard. A toddler, 2 words. Yet those 2 words carried more weight than decades of testimony. The tension thickened, pressing against the walls, the benches, the judge's gavel, until the air felt electrically charged. Lily shifted, pointing again, not at Ranger's head, not at his paws, but at the vest strapped across his broad back. The object in the vest, so ordinary to an officer, suddenly became the center of attention. The handler followed her gesture, his fingers brushing over the fabric, pausing at a subtle outline beneath the Velcro. The courtroom leaned in, every eye fixed, every breath held. Whispered conversations erupted like sudden storms. Detective Harlan's pulse pounded in his ears. Lily's mother was gripping her chair, knuckles white, eyes wide with fear and anticipation. The judge's gavel hovered over the bench, a silent warning for order, though no one seemed able to move. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene. Cameras clicked, capturing the moment for history. Somewhere in the chaos, a young reporter scribbled rapidly, realizing she was witnessing something extraordinary. A toddler, a police dog, and a case that had been cold for 3 years, converging in one instant of revelation. And then Lily spoke again, louder this time, her small voice steady despite the enormity of the room. "Open it." The words hung in the air, heavy and deliberate, an impossible command from the smallest witness in the county's history. Every adult froze, caught between disbelief and the undeniable pull of curiosity. Ranger tilted his head, growling softly, sensing the charged energy. The handler's fingers hovered over the flap on the dog's vest, hesitating, knowing that whatever lay beneath could change everything. For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath as time slowed. And then, slowly, the handler made the choice to obey the child's direction. The courtroom seemed to exhale as the handler's fingers hesitated above Ranger's vest, the air heavy with anticipation and disbelief. Every adult present was leaning forward, as if movement might somehow help them understand the impossible scene unfolding before their eyes. 3-year-old Lily Carter had just commanded a seasoned police dog to reveal what was hidden beneath his vest, and the room held its collective breath, waiting for a revelation that none of them were prepared to comprehend. Detective Mark Harlan's jaw clenched as he studied the child. Lily's tiny hand had been steady when she pointed, unshaken by the hundreds of eyes on her. She had not whimpered. She had not cried. She had not been distracted by the journalists, the flashing cameras, or the looming adults in black suits. She had simply known, and that knowing was about to expose a truth buried deeper than anyone suspected. The handler's hands brushed over the vest once more, his gloved fingers tracing the edges of a subtle bulge. He exchanged a nervous glance with Ranger, who was now sitting obediently but visibly alert, ears perked and eyes locked on the little girl. Ranger's tail twitched once, an almost imperceptible warning, but the entire courtroom felt its presence, a ripple of unease spreading across benches and podiums alike. "May I proceed?" the handler asked the judge quietly, his voice tight. The judge, her sharp eyes narrowing behind her glasses, nodded. "Proceed," slowly, carefully. A hush fell over the courtroom. Journalists held their breath. Lawyers leaned forward. Even the spectators seemed frozen in anticipation, the hum of anxiety buzzing in the room like static electricity. Lily's mother gripped her daughter's hand so tightly that her knuckles were white, but she didn't dare interrupt. She only whispered, "It's okay, baby, you're brave." Lily's lips twitched in the ghost of a smile, and then she simply nodded. The handler slowly lifted the flap on Ranger's vest, exposing what lay beneath. For a moment, it seemed impossibly small, almost trivial, a delicate metallic glint, barely visible against the fabric. But as he drew it into the light, the entire room seemed to gasp in unison. A tiny locket, bent at the hinge, delicate and worn, lay in the handler's hand. Its surface was scratched from years of unnoticed use, dust clinging stubbornly to the edges. It was unremarkable to most people, just an old trinket. But to Lily, the locket was everything. Her eyes widened and she reached out instinctively. "That's Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling yet filled with certainty. Her mother's breath caught. Claire Carter's hands flew to her mouth as tears pricked her eyes. "Oh, Lily," she murmured. "Oh my God." The defense attorney's face went pale. "Your Honor, I object. This is preposterous. A 3-year-old cannot identify anything with legal validity. This is—" "Silence," the judge thundered, pounding her gavel. The sound reverberated off the wooden walls and everyone froze. "We proceed. Let the child speak. This court will determine relevance, not conjecture." Detective Harlan's mind raced. He had been on countless crime scenes, interrogations, and trials, but never had a single piece of evidence carried the weight of emotion and mystery as this locket did. 3 years ago, Lily's father had vanished, leaving behind no trace but heartache and unanswered questions. Now, a toddler held the key, and the courtroom was about to witness a connection no adult could have orchestrated. Lily leaned forward, holding the rabbit with one hand while gently lifting the locket with the other. Her small fingers traced the worn metal as if feeling memories embedded within it. The photograph inside was faded, almost ghostly, a face marked by worry and exhaustion. Lily's lips quivered as she whispered, "That's Daddy." The room erupted into whispers, some excited, some skeptical. Cameras clicked rapidly, journalists scribbling notes furiously. The prosecutor, a tall woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Lily, what did Daddy tell you? What happened?" Lily's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to the locket, then toward the defendant, Caleb Reese. Her expression hardened in the way only a child can manage when facing danger she instinctively recognizes. He's a bad man," she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm enough to silence the murmurs entirely. The courtroom froze. Caleb's face turned ashen. Sweat rolled down his temples. Ranger growled, low and rumbling, his eyes fixed unwaveringly on the man. The handler's grip on the leash tightened, though the dog remained still, body tense, as if understanding the gravity of Lily's words. Detective Harlan felt the weight of the moment. 3 words, simple in structure, yet shattering in their implications. Lily's father had vanished without explanation, and here was the first hint. perhaps the first undeniable clue that someone was directly responsible. The judge leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "Explain, young lady, how do you know this man is bad?" Lily's small voice barely rose above a whisper, yet it carried a weight no one expected. He took Daddy." A murmur ran through the courtroom, rising like a tide of shock and disbelief. The defense attorney stammered, trying to find words, his face pale and drawn. "Your Honor, this is inadmissible. This is chaos." The judge raised her hand again, commanding silence. "Let the child continue. Order in the court." The handler slowly lifted Ranger's vest further, revealing the depth of the hidden compartment. Inside, dust and age made the edges nearly invisible, but the locket's placement suggested intentional concealment. The courtroom realized in a single, horrifying moment that this was no accident. Someone had deliberately placed the locket on Ranger, ensuring that only a child like Lily, who had inexplicably remembered the details, could identify it. Lily's mother buried her face in her hands, muffling a sob. Claire Carter's knees shook, and she gripped the edge of the bench for support. The spectators leaned forward, wide-eyed, unable to look away. Journalists whispered, exchanging notes and glances, realizing that this story would be on every front page by tomorrow. Detective Harlan's mind raced through possibilities. How had the locket ended up here? Had it been planted? And if so, who could have predicted that Lily would recognize it? The logistics alone were baffling, but there was something else, something almost supernatural in the precision with which this sequence of events had unfolded. Ranger's growl deepened. His body stiffened as he stepped slightly toward the defense table, nose twitching, sensing what none of the adults could fully comprehend. Caleb Reese's hands shook. He swallowed hard, as if suddenly realizing that every eye in the courtroom was not only watching him, but watching through the lens of truth that even a child and a dog could see. The judge's gavel pounded again, demanding order. "Bailiff, please secure the defendant, and the K-9 shall remain." Caleb rose, sputtering as if to protest, but Ranger barked sharply, low and commanding. The dog's body language was clear: "Move forward and you face consequences." Caleb froze, eyes wide, his body rigid. The bailiff stepped closer, unsure if he was about to witness a breakdown or something far worse. Lily remained calm despite the tension. She held the locket gently in her small hands, eyes never leaving the man across the room. Her voice, though tiny, carried a clarity and authority that silenced even the murmurs in the gallery. "He did it. He hurt Daddy." The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she absorbed the weight of the statement. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath, teetering on the edge between disbelief and horror. Detective Harlan felt his pulse quicken. He had trained his instincts for decades, and every fiber of his being screamed that this was the moment the case would pivot irreversibly. And then, as if on cue, Ranger pawed at the floor, eyes locking on Caleb Reese. The growl escalated into a warning bark, sharp and commanding, shaking the very air in the courtroom. The sound reverberated through the wooden walls, and a hush fell again, more intense than before. Lily's small voice rose once more. "Open it." The words rang out with absolute certainty, the tiniest girl giving the adults in the room a command none of them dared to question. The handler's fingers hovered over Ranger's vest, knowing that whatever lay beneath could change the trajectory of the trial, and perhaps reveal the darkest truths hidden for 3 long years. The entire courtroom seemed suspended in that moment, a single breath stretching into eternity. The judge's eyes widened. The attorneys froze. Detective Harlan's hand tightened around the bench. The journalists' pens hovered mid-stroke. Everyone was aware that what came next could shatter the case, the courtroom, and the lives of everyone involved. And then, slowly, the handler began to lift the flap. The handler's hands trembled as he carefully lifted the flap of Ranger's vest, revealing the small, hidden compartment in its entirety. The courtroom leaned forward, every eye fixed, every breath caught in anticipation. The compartment was deeper than it had first appeared, lined with worn fabric that seemed to have absorbed years of dust and neglect. At the center lay the object Lily had been pointing at, the tiny, metallic locket, bent at the hinge but unmistakably human in origin. Detective Mark Harlan's heart pounded in his chest. He had expected a clue, perhaps a small token, but nothing had prepared him for the possibility that this locket could be directly linked to the night Lily's father had vanished. He watched as Lily reached out with her small, delicate fingers, touching the locket as if recognizing a long-lost friend. Her tiny hand barely managed to lift it, but in that instant, she radiated an understanding far beyond her years. "Your Honor," whispered the prosecutor, leaning toward the bench, I think she knows something. She remembers." The judge's expression remained stern, but her eyes betrayed curiosity. "Proceed carefully. Let the child explain." Lily's mother, Claire, buried her face in her hands, trembling. "Oh, Lily," she whispered, "be brave, you're so brave." Lily's lips moved as she looked at the locket, then at the massive K9, then at the man sitting on the defense table, Caleb Reese. "Daddy gave it to me," she said softly, voice quivering. "He said, keep it safe." A hush fell over the courtroom. Caleb's face turned pale, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Ranger shifted slightly, low growl rumbling in his throat. The dog's behavior made everyone uneasy, and the tension in the room thickened like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Detective Harlan remembered the night Lily had been found. The child had wandered behind an abandoned warehouse, soaked and shivering, unable to explain how she had gotten there or where her father had gone. That memory, long buried under months of investigation, resurfaced now with sharp intensity. The locket in Ranger's vest suggested a link between Lily, the child who had survived unimaginable fear, and Caleb Reese, the man sitting rigid and sweating at the defense table. The judge spoke, her voice steady but sharp. "Lily, can you tell us what happened the night your father disappeared?" Lily's small hand clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. Her wide eyes flicked to the defendant, then to Ranger, and finally back to the locket. He took Daddy," she said, her voice small but unwavering. Gasps erupted in the courtroom. Journalists whispered furiously, trying to document every word. The gallery was silent, frozen in shock. The defense attorney stood abruptly. "Objection! This is inadmissible. This child cannot possibly understand the complexities of this case." The judge slammed her gavel. "I will allow it. The child is speaking her truth. Order in the court." Ranger let out a low, warning growl, stepping slightly closer to Caleb, who flinched involuntarily. The dog's eyes, dark and unyielding, seemed to pierce the man's soul. Detective Harlan felt a chill run down his spine. He had trained dogs for decades, but Ranger's instincts were more than training. They were an unspoken understanding of danger, of truth, of guilt. Lily held the locket carefully, opening it to reveal a faded photograph. The man in the picture was her father, eyes tired but gentle, staring directly at the camera. Lily's finger traced the image and she whispered, "That's Daddy." The courtroom seemed to tilt on its axis. Claire Carter's hands trembled as she covered her mouth, stifling a sob. The prosecutors leaned forward, pens frozen above legal pads, realizing they were witnessing the first tangible connection between Lily's father and Caleb Reese. Caleb shifted in his seat, his hands trembling. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but the words fell flat against the weight of the moment. Ranger's growl deepened, low and guttural, as though warning everyone of the danger that man represented. Detective Harlan's mind raced. He had seen criminals break under interrogation, but never in the presence of a toddler and a police dog simultaneously. The dynamic was almost surreal, a mixture of innocence and instinct that left the courtroom unmoored. He glanced at the prosecutor, who nodded slightly. She, too, recognized the gravity of the moment. Lily's eyes locked onto Caleb's. Her small voice, fragile yet commanding, spoke again. "He's a bad man." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Caleb's face drained of color. Sweat slid down his temples and he opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to form a coherent defense. The defense attorney shouted, demanding the court recognize the impossibility of this testimony, but his voice was drowned in the intensity of what was happening. Ranger moved closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over Caleb. His growl escalated, a warning that seemed almost sentient, a declaration that danger was present. The handler's hands tightened on the leash, knowing Ranger would not be dissuaded. This was more than obedience. This was instinct, a reaction no human could fabricate. Lily's small fingers traced the edges of the locket once more. "Daddy said, don't trust him," she said, eyes wide. "He's bad." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Parents clutched their children, reporters scribbled frantically, and even the judge leaned forward, her gavel poised but unused, as if afraid to break the fragile tension in the room. Detective Harlan's pulse raced. He knew they were on the cusp of a revelation that could finally explain what had happened to Lily's father. The handler's voice was barely audible as he whispered, "Ranger, find." The dog stiffened, eyes locking on Caleb, nose twitching as he pressed closer. The growl turned into a bark, low, sharp, unyielding. The sound shook the air, the courtroom, the very nerves of everyone present. Caleb's knees buckled slightly beneath him. He looked desperately at his attorney, but there was no escape. Ranger had him. Lily reached out, placing her hand gently on the dog's head. "He's the one," she whispered. "The bad man." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Bailiff, ensure the defendant remains seated and restrained. This court acknowledges the child's identification." The gallery erupted into whispers, some fearful, some shocked, some incredulous. Detective Harlan remained silent, watching the interaction between Lily and Ranger, aware that every movement carried meaning. The tiny girl who had been lost and frightened 3 years ago now commanded the attention and respect of every adult in the room, holding the key to unraveling a mystery that had confounded law enforcement for years. Ranger's growl softened slightly, though he remained alert, his gaze never leaving Caleb. The locket in Lily's hand seemed almost to pulse with significance, a silent testimony to the past and a warning for the present. The courtroom, still tense, waited for the next move, knowing instinctively that the story was far from over. Then Lily whispered, just loud enough for the closest attorneys to hear, "Open it." The words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Every adult in the courtroom froze. The judge blinked behind her glasses. Caleb's hands shook. Ranger's ears twitched, sensing the command, sensing the importance of what was about to be revealed. Detective Harlan's breath caught. This was the moment when the truth would finally begin to surface. The handler's fingers hovered over the hidden compartment, his hand shaking slightly. Sweat glistened on his brow, though it wasn't from heat, it was anticipation. Slowly, carefully, deliberately, he began to lift the contents of the vest fully into view, revealing the locket in its entirety, and with it, a truth that would shock the courtroom to its core. Every eye remained fixed. Every breath was held. And in that suspended moment, time seemed to stand still, waiting for the revelation that would change everything. Part 3, 1,200 words, leaving the story on suspense as the locket is fully revealed and the courtroom braces for the shocking truths inside. The courtroom fell into a suffocating silence as the handler held the locket fully in his hands. Dust clung stubbornly to the metal, its surface scratched and bent at the hinge as if it had traveled through countless hands and hidden corners. Detective Mark Harlan's fingers clenched the edge of the bench. Every muscle in his body was taut. For 3 years, the disappearance of Lily's father had been a haunting question mark over the Carter family, a void filled with speculation, rumors, and unanswered cries. Now, a 3-year-old was about to illuminate the darkness, and every adult in the room could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Lily's small hand reached out, brushing the locket's surface delicately. The German Shepherd, Ranger, shifted slightly, growl lowering to a murmur, eyes fixed on her tiny movements. Even the handler seemed to hesitate, aware of the fragility of what lay in the girl's hands. The judge leaned forward, every line on her face etched with curiosity and cautious restraint. "Lily," the prosecutor said softly, kneeling slightly to meet the girl's eye level, "can you show us what's inside?" Lily nodded slowly. Her small fingers pried open the bent hinge with careful precision. The locket popped open, revealing a faded photograph that had been tucked away for years, untouched and almost invisible. The image was ghostly in color, yellowed around the edges, but the face it captured was unmistakable: Lily's father. His eyes, tired and haunted, stared out from the photograph with a mixture of fear and pleading, as if trying to communicate a message across time and absence. The room collectively inhaled, a single silent gasp. Claire Carter buried her face in her hands, sobs shaking her shoulders. "Oh my God," she whispered, voice breaking. "Oh, Lily, it's him. It's really him." Caleb Reese, seated stiffly at the defense table, froze. His lips parted, then closed, trying to force words that refused to come. His eyes darted nervously from the locket to Lily, the 3-year-old who seemed impossibly perceptive, to Ranger, the dog who had never once been wrong in his instincts. The defense attorney whispered urgently, but the words seemed to evaporate against the weight of reality pressing in. Detective Harlan leaned forward, focusing on the photograph. Every detail of the man in the picture, a trace of dirt on his shirt, the strain in his eyes, the subtle curve of fear in his expression, was familiar. He remembered the warehouse where Lily had been found. He remembered the signs of struggle. And now, the locket was proof that the missing man had been somewhere beyond reach, perhaps even somewhere controlled by the very man sitting across the room. Lily's finger traced the photograph, moving across her father's face as if reassuring him. "That's Daddy," she whispered, voice trembling but unwavering. "He's hiding." The prosecutor leaned closer to the judge. "Your Honor, we believe this locket was hidden deliberately in the K-9's vest to lead us to the truth. Lily's identification is precise. The dog's reaction corroborates her memory. We are looking at evidence that directly ties the defendant to the disappearance." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Spectators leaned forward, some whispering, some clutching their children, as if fearing that even the air could transmit the gravity of the moment. Reporters scribbled furiously, realizing that this scene, the smallest witness, the dog, the hidden locket, would become an image that defined investigative ingenuity and the power of instinct. Caleb Reese shifted in his seat, his breathing shallow. He had anticipated denials, legal maneuvers, delays, but never had he imagined that a toddler and a police dog could unravel a secret he had worked so hard to conceal. Ranger's low growl had intensified again, warning him, and Caleb's eyes flicked toward the leash in the handler's hands. He realized too late that his control over the situation had evaporated. Lily's mother, still gripping her daughter's hand, whispered softly, "It's okay, baby. You're helping us find him." The child's wide eyes met her mother, then returned to the photograph. "He's scared," Lily said quietly. "The bad man hurt him. Daddy said, don't trust him." The courtroom shivered under the weight of that statement. Words that simple, coming from the smallest witness, carried more impact than a month of legal arguments. Detective Harlan felt a shiver run down his spine. The investigation had stalled for years, hindered by lack of evidence and the absence of any reliable witness. Now in this courtroom, Lily, tiny, vulnerable, and yet astonishingly brave, was providing clarity that adults could barely grasp. The judge adjusted her glasses, scanning the room with a mixture of disbelief and cautious authority. "Bailiff," she instructed, "keep the defendant seated. He will not interfere with the proceedings." Caleb's hands trembled, resting atop the defense table. His eyes flicked nervously toward Ranger, then toward Lily, whose gaze seemed to pierce his conscience. The dog growled again, low and deliberate, a warning that intensified the tension in the room. Detective Harlan recognized the signal instantly. Ranger was detecting the faintest trace of guilt, a residue only perceptible to the sharpest instincts of a trained K-9. Lily's small voice rang out again, almost a whisper, yet it carried across the courtroom with absolute clarity. "He's lying." The words sent another ripple through the courtroom. The defense attorney stammered, "Your Honor, this is preposterous. A child cannot testify to intent or honesty." The judge banged her gavel. "Order! The child is speaking what she remembers and what she observes. That will be noted on the record." Lily held the locket delicately, opening and closing it as if drawing strength from the object. "Daddy said hide it, keep it safe. The bad man, he wants to take it." Detective Harlan's stomach tightened. This wasn't just evidence. This was a map of danger, a signal pointing directly at Caleb Reese's role in the disappearance. Ranger, sensing the heightened tension, stepped closer to Lily, pressing his massive head gently against her shoulder, protective and alert. The prosecutor leaned forward, eyes locked on the child. "Lily, can you tell us where Daddy is, where he's been?" The child's lips trembled. She opened her mouth, then paused, her eyes flicking to the dog and then to her mother. "He's hiding," she said finally, voice barely audible, but every ear in the room picked it up. "The bad man took him somewhere scary." Gasps echoed across the gallery. Claire Carter's hands flew to her face, sobs choking her as she rocked forward slightly. Detective Harlan's mind raced, connecting dots that had been dark for over 3 years. Every missing hour, every unanswered phone call, every rumor now had context. Lily's words, Ranger's instincts, and the locket combined into a revelation so stark it made the room's tension almost unbearable. The handler shifted, gently holding Ranger's leash. The dog's growl subsided slightly, though his body remained alert, eyes locked on Caleb. The courtroom collectively leaned forward, waiting for the next development. The child's testimony, coupled with Ranger's behavior, had transformed a simple locket into a piece of evidence that spoke volumes, bypassing decades of skepticism and legal maneuvering. Lily's small fingers traced the photograph one last time. "Daddy said, 'Don't let him win,'" she whispered. The words struck the courtroom like a lightning bolt. Caleb's face went white and sweat beaded on his forehead. Ranger barked sharply, growling at the defendant, signaling an undeniable truth that no adult testimony could override. Detective Harlan's pulse raced. He knew the next moments would be pivotal, shaping the entire case. The judge's gavel hit the bench again, loud and final. "We will now proceed to uncover the truth fully. Bailiff, ensure security. The locket remains as evidence, and the child's observations are part of this record." Lily looked up at Ranger, her small hand gently resting on his massive head. She didn't need to say anything more. The dog seemed to understand completely. The courtroom, filled with professionals accustomed to handling criminal cases, now found itself at the mercy of a 3-year-old and a police dog, both leading the way toward a truth long buried in darkness. Detective Harlan's mind raced with possibilities, trying to anticipate what the locket, Lily's memory, and Ranger's instincts would reveal next. He knew the hardest part of the investigation was just beginning, and yet there was a glimmer of hope, a chance that the missing father might finally be found. The courtroom waited, breathless, and as Lily whispered again to herself, barely audible, she said the words that would echo long after this day. He knows we're coming." Detective Mark Harlan's mind drifted back to the night Lily had been found. The memory was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. Rain had fallen in relentless sheets, drumming against the warehouse roof like a warning from the heavens. The warehouse had been abandoned, or so everyone thought, but that night it had been anything but empty. Harlan remembered the puddles on the cracked concrete, the smell of wet earth mixing with dust and oil, and the faint metallic tang that clung to the air. Lily had been there, a tiny figure shivering in the darkness, her yellow dress soaked and sticking to her skin, eyes wide with fear. She hadn't been able to speak much, just clung to her rabbit, rocking back and forth as though the stuffed toy could shield her from the horrors around her. No one knew exactly how she had ended up there. No one, except perhaps Caleb Reese. Tonight in the courtroom, the puzzle pieces that had eluded investigators for years were beginning to fall into place. Lily held the locket now, her tiny fingers clutching it tightly. The photograph of her father stared back at the adults, but for Lily, it was more than an image. It was a memory, a link to a man who had been taken from her. Caleb Reese's face had drained of color. He had never anticipated that a toddler and a police dog could unravel the carefully constructed web he had spun over 3 years. Ranger, the massive German shepherd, growled low and deliberate, a sound that made even the seasoned officers in the room pause. The dog's instincts were telling them something the law couldn't yet articulate. Caleb was guilty, and he had led everyone to the truth, unwittingly. The defense attorney's protests became frantic. "Your Honor, this is manipulation. A child cannot testify about adult intentions. The dog cannot. This is absurd." The judge slammed her gavel. "Order. The court recognizes the observations of the witness and the K-9 as evidence. Proceed." Harlan felt his pulse accelerate. He had trained dogs for decades, had seen countless crime scenes, interrogated dozens of suspects, but nothing compared to this convergence of child, canine, and hidden evidence. He leaned closer, watching as Lily's gaze shifted between Caleb and Ranger, as if seeing through the man to the truth hidden beneath. Then, almost imperceptibly, Ranger began packing toward the defense table. His growl deepened, a low, resonant warning that made the courtroom shiver. Caleb froze, realizing that the dog was reacting to him, not to anyone else. The officer beside Harlan whispered under his breath, "That dog knows something, something he can't lie about." Ranger stopped at Caleb's boots, nose brushing against the leather. His paw lifted, a subtle signal, trained but instinctive. Caleb's hands shook violently. Sweat dripped down his temples as he swallowed hard, eyes darting to his attorney, who appeared powerless to stop what was unfolding. Lily watched intently, her small fingers clutching the locket. He hurt Daddy," she said softly, voice barely audible but crystal clear in the tense silence. "The bad man hurt him." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Claire Carter covered her mouth with her hands, shaking as tears streamed down her face. The gallery was silent, frozen in shock. Journalists scribbled furiously, some whispering to each other, realizing they were witnessing a story that would define investigative work for years to come. Detective Harlan's mind raced. Every detail of the case, the abandoned warehouse, the missing father, the circumstantial evidence pointing to Caleb, now aligned with the tangible proof. Lily's testimony, Ranger's behavior, and the locket itself. Caleb had underestimated both human and canine instinct, and that miscalculation was about to unravel everything he had hidden. The prosecutor leaned toward the judge, urgency in her voice. "Your Honor, the evidence is mounting." Lily's statements, corroborated by Ranger's trained detection of danger and recognition, strongly indicate that the defendant has direct involvement in the disappearance. "We need to act." Caleb's eyes widened. For the first time, fear overtook arrogance. He could feel the courtroom closing in, every eye a judgment he could not escape. Ranger growled again, stepping slightly closer, warning of danger. The dog's instincts were flawless, and the presence of the child only heightened them. Detective Harlan remembered the night of Lily's father's disappearance in sharp, painful clarity. Caleb had been meticulous, careful to leave no trace, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no evidence linking him to the crime. Yet here was a toddler, armed only with memory and intuition, and a dog whose senses had never been wrong. They were unraveling the case effortlessly, exposing Caleb's secrets with a precision that years of investigation could not achieve. Lily's small voice broke the silence again. He locked Daddy up," she said, pointing at the defendant, "in the place with water and the smell." The courtroom murmured. Everyone leaned forward. The detail, innocuous to a 3-year-old, carried horrifying weight. Harlan's mind raced, picturing the warehouse, the shadows, the cold, the damp floors. Caleb had left subtle markers in his environment, markers that Lily had remembered and verbalized without prompting. The judge leaned forward, her gavel ready but unused, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Child, please continue." Lily's eyes flicked to Ranger, then back to the defendant. "Daddy said, don't trust him, he's bad, he hurt Daddy." Ranger's growl intensified, the sound vibrating in the courtroom. Caleb flinched. His attorney leaned over, whispering urgently, but Caleb's eyes were locked on Ranger, on the child, on the undeniable truth staring him down. Detective Harlan felt his stomach tighten. This was more than a case. It was a revelation. A 3-year-old girl, a K-9, and a locket had exposed the darkest corners of a man who had believed himself untouchable. The child's memory and Ranger's instincts had bridged 3 years of silence, fear, and uncertainty. The gallery held its breath as Lily took a small step closer to Ranger. She whispered again, barely audible, "He's lying." The words, so simple, carried immense weight. Caleb's face turned white, his hands trembling uncontrollably. Ranger stepped forward, barking sharply, growling with authority. The handler tightened his grip, holding the dog back, but Ranger's body language was impossible to ignore. Guilt had been found, and instinct would not be wrong. Detective Harlan watched, understanding fully that the night of Lily's father's disappearance was being reconstructed in that very room, through the memory of a child and the instincts of a trained police dog. Every officer, every spectator, every attorney knew they were witnessing the unraveling of a carefully hidden crime. And then, as if to punctuate the moment, something small but heavy fell from Caleb's pocket. A metallic clatter echoed through the courtroom. Eyes darted toward the object as it hit the floor. Ranger stiffened, growl turning into a sharp bark. Lily's eyes widened, recognizing instantly the significance of the fallen item. The bailiff stepped forward, bending to pick it up. The object was unmistakable, a second locket, identical to the one hidden in Ranger's vest. Inside, another photograph, Lily's father bruised, tied to a chair, eyes pleading for help. The timestamp indicated the night of his disappearance. The courtroom gasped collectively. Claire Carter's hands flew to her face, tears streaming freely. Lily clutched Ranger's head for comfort, as though the dog's presence was the only thing holding the room together. Caleb slumped in his chair, realization dawning that every secret he had buried had been unearthed by the smallest witness and a dog trained to detect truth. The prosecutor stepped forward, voice resolute. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The child's statements, Ranger's behavior, the hidden locket, and the object revealed by the defendant himself all point to direct involvement. We request immediate proceedings to ensure the victim's safety and justice." Detective Harlan exhaled slowly, tension leaving his body only slightly. He knew the night everything changed had been reconstructed in the courtroom, piece by piece. The child, the dog, and the evidence had rewritten 3 years of unanswered questions. Lily whispered once more to herself, holding the locket close, "He knows we're coming." The courtroom waited, breathless, as officers moved to restrain Caleb Reese. Ranger, finally calm but vigilant, rested his head gently on Lily's shoulder. The tiny girl had been the pivot point, the lens through which the truth had become visible. And for the first time in years, the Carter family felt a glimmer of hope that the nightmare of the past could finally be resolved. The courtroom felt electrified, every eye fixed on Ranger. The massive German shepherd, trained for obedience, explosives, and human scent detection, now became the center of the investigation in a way no one had anticipated. His ears twitched, muscles coiled like springs, and his low growl resonated through the room. The dog was more than a witness. He was a living, breathing instrument of truth, reacting instinctively to the smallest hints of danger, deception, and fear. Detective Mark Harlan studied Ranger carefully. He had handled the dog during countless investigations, yet this was different. Never had he witnessed a K-9's instincts so precisely aligned with the revelations of a 3-year-old witness. Ranger's focus was unwavering, directed entirely at Caleb Reese, whose pale face and trembling hands betrayed the recognition that his secrets were unraveling in real time. The prosecutor leaned in toward the judge, voice barely above a whisper but urgent. "Your Honor, Ranger is exhibiting highly specialized trained behaviors, consistent with detection of human remains, concealed evidence, and imminent danger. He is pointing directly at the defendant. This behavior corroborates Lily's testimony and the discovery of the locket." The judge adjusted her glasses, leaning forward. "Very well. The K9 may demonstrate his recognition under controlled conditions." A hush fell over the courtroom. Spectators leaned forward, cameras clicked rapidly, journalists scribbled furiously. Every adult present realized that they were about to witness the first court demonstration of a dog's trained instincts functioning as a form of testimony in a criminal case. Ranger's handler moved slowly, speaking softly to the dog. "Ranger, show them." The German shepherd stiffened, eyes locking on Caleb. His massive body moved forward with precision, paws stepping carefully on the polished floor. The growl deepened, low and guttural, vibrating through the courtroom walls. Caleb's hands shook uncontrollably. He realized that the dog was not merely reacting. Ranger was identifying the human source of a hidden threat, the very individual responsible for the disappearance of Lily's father. Detective Harlan noted every detail. Ranger's posture was taut, his focus absolute, every movement deliberate. His instincts, honed over years of service, were aligning with the memory and words of a 3-year-old child. Lily, clutching her rabbit and the locket, watched intently, eyes wide and unwavering. Even at 3 years old, she seemed to understand that Ranger's behavior confirmed what she already knew. The prosecutor addressed the court. "Your Honor, we request that Ranger demonstrate his ability to identify the location of the victim, based on the scent trail associated with the defendant. This K9 has never been wrong in identifying human remains or detecting concealment. His actions can lead directly to the recovery of the victim and strengthen our case against the defendant." Caleb's face drained of color. Sweat rolled down his temples. He had anticipated interrogations, witnesses, and even forensic evidence, but never had he imagined a toddler and a dog working in tandem to reconstruct his crime. Ranger's growl escalated, sending a ripple of fear through the courtroom. The massive animal's instincts were undeniable. Every subtle movement, every shift in his body language, screamed truth. Lily whispered softly to Ranger, "Daddy's hiding, help find him." The dog's ears twitched, eyes narrowing. He stepped closer to Caleb, nose quivering, detecting the faintest scent of the victim's presence lingering on the man. Ranger barked sharply, a warning that amplified the tension in the room. The gallery gasped collectively. Caleb flinched, realizing that escape or deception was impossible. Detective Harlan motioned to the handler, signaling calm. Ranger obeyed, though his body remained coiled and alert. "Ranger, lead us to the scent," Harlan instructed quietly. The dog moved toward Caleb, sniffing the air, tail stiff. Then, with deliberate purpose, Ranger turned slightly, directing attention toward a corner of the courtroom near the entrance. His body language was clear. The trail began here. Everyone in the room leaned forward, realizing that Ranger's demonstration was about to pinpoint critical evidence, hidden not in plain sight but in the subtle residue of a criminal act. Lily's eyes widened. "There," she whispered, pointing toward the corner. "That's where he—" Her voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Caleb's face tightened. The man knew what she was implying, knew that the dog's instincts, coupled with her memory, were exposing his secrets with terrifying precision. The handler carefully knelt, holding Ranger's leash while the dog circled the indicated area. His massive nose brushed along the floor, detecting minute traces invisible to humans. Ranger froze, paw raised, ears erect. He let out a sharp bark, signaling the presence of evidence, and the bailiff carefully approached the area. Detective Harlan moved closer, inspecting the corner as Ranger remained motionless, signaling with unwavering focus. A folded, worn piece of fabric lay partially hidden behind a bench. Dust and time had nearly erased its presence. Ranger barked again, pawing gently at the object, alerting the courtroom that the evidence had been located. The prosecutor stepped forward, gloves on, carefully retrieving the fabric. It was soaked in faint but unmistakable traces of blood. Detective Harlan's stomach tightened. He had seen countless crime scenes, but the combination of the child's memory, the K-9's instincts, and the tangible evidence made this moment surreal. Caleb Reese's face paled. He swallowed hard, realizing that the evidence, now undeniably linked to him, would directly tie him to the disappearance and presumed assault of Lily's father. Ranger barked again, circling Caleb and growling low, a warning and confirmation of guilt that needed no words. Lily whispered softly to her mother, voice trembling but firm. "He hurt Daddy, but Ranger will find him." The gallery remained silent, every adult aware that the courtroom had become a stage for the convergence of human intuition and canine precision. The child had remembered details no one expected her to retain. Ranger had followed instinct and training, confirming the location of the first tangible clue that could lead to Lily's father. The judge leaned forward, voice calm but heavy with authority. "This court acknowledges the demonstration. The K-9's behavior, in conjunction with the child's testimony, provides substantial evidence to proceed with recovery and interrogation. Bailiff, ensure security while officers handle the evidence carefully." Detective Harlan exhaled slowly, tension leaving him only slightly. He knew that the case had entered a new phase, one where the combination of a child's memory and a dog's instincts had broken through years of deception and fear. The evidence was now indisputable, the defendant's control evaporating in real time. Caleb slumped in his seat, staring at Ranger at the evidence at Lily. His arrogance had been stripped away. Ranger, still alert, remained a silent sentinel, protecting the smallest witness while signaling the undeniable truth. The handler's hands tightened on the leash, careful not to overcorrect, knowing that Ranger's instincts were guiding the investigation in ways human logic could not. Detective Harlan recognized the brilliance of this partnership, the child, the dog, and the evidence forming an unbreakable chain of truth. And then Lily, clutching her rabbit, whispered again, eyes wide, "He knows we're coming for Daddy." The words hung in the courtroom like a promise, an echo of hope and determination that no adult could dismiss. Ranger barked sharply once, growled low once, and then sat, signaling readiness to lead authorities to the final revelation of 3 years of unanswered questions. The entire room, from judge to gallery, understood that the night of Lily's father's disappearance was about to be reconstructed fully, and that Caleb Reese's carefully hidden crimes were unraveling under the unlikeliest of witnesses, a 3-year-old girl and a German shepherd who knew the truth. Detective Mark Harlan felt the room tighten around him as Ranger sat rigid, ears pricked and nose quivering. The dog had located the trail and was now unmistakably indicating the direction to follow. The courtroom, still frozen in tension, seemed to shrink to the size of the child, the dog, and the defendant. Lily clutched her rabbit and the locket, her wide eyes never leaving Caleb Reese, whose face had lost all color. The man now understood that every secret he had buried for 3 years was unraveling before him, piece by piece, guided by the memory of a child and the instincts of a trained K-9. The judge leaned forward, voice steady but tense. "Bailiff, coordinate with law enforcement. The location must be secured immediately." Ranger barked sharply, then padded to the far corner of the courtroom, tail stiff, eyes locked on the door. His growl intensified, a signal that the scent trail led beyond the walls of the building. Detective Harlan, realizing the urgency, nodded to a team of officers who were already poised for action. They followed Ranger, cameras and spectators momentarily set aside as law enforcement moved with precision, guided by instincts and memory rather than evidence charts and reports. Outside, the rain had begun again, falling in relentless sheets that soaked everything it touched. The darkened alleyways and damp pavement mirrored the fear and anticipation coursing through the team. Ranger led confidently, leash taut, nose close to the ground. Lily, held carefully by her mother, whispered softly, "Daddy, Daddy, we're coming." Detective Harlan's heart pounded. He had navigated countless crime scenes, but this was different. A toddler and a dog were leading them to a man who had eluded justice for 3 years. Every step was a risk, every moment a test of nerves, yet the trail was undeniable. Ranger's body language was perfect, alert, deliberate, unerring. The dog had never been wrong, and now the weight of truth hung heavily in the storm-soaked night. They reached an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place familiar to Harlan from previous reports of missing persons. Ranger's growl intensified as he stopped at the entrance, pawing at a side door partially concealed behind debris. Caleb Reese, restrained in the back of a police van and now fully aware that escape was impossible, watched silently, beads of sweat dripping down his pale face. Lily tugged gently at her mother's hand, whispering, "He's inside, Daddy is inside." The officers exchanged tense glances. The warehouse was dark and silent, except for the faint patter of rain on the tin roof. Detective Harlan stepped forward, flashlight in hand, signaling the team to proceed with caution. Ranger padded ahead, nose to the ground, tail high, growl low and warning. The door creaked as it was pushed open, revealing a small, dimly lit room at the far end of the warehouse. And there, tied to a chair, sat Lily's father. His clothes were torn, his face bruised and pale, eyes wide with relief and disbelief as he saw his daughter approaching, guided by the smallest witness he had ever imagined. "Daddy," Lily shouted, voice cracking with emotion. She ran forward, ignoring the puddles and the cold, wrapping her tiny arms around him. Detective Harlan moved quickly to cut the restraints, hands working efficiently, though his eyes were never off the perimeter for potential danger. Ranger sat obediently nearby, still alert, tail slowly wagging, sensing the moment's relief but remaining vigilant. Claire Carter rushed forward, tears streaming, enveloping her husband in a desperate embrace. "We found you," she whispered, voice trembling. "We found you thanks to her." Lily's father sobbed quietly, clutching both his daughter and his wife, whispering words of disbelief and gratitude. I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he said, voice breaking. Thank you all." Detective Harlan scanned the room, noting the meticulous concealment Caleb Reese had employed. Every corner had been strategically used to hide evidence, every shadow a potential hiding place for danger. But Ranger had detected every subtle trace, every faint scent, proving the dog's instinct and training were flawless. Officers moved carefully through the warehouse, gathering physical evidence while maintaining safety. Ranger's focus remained sharp, eyes scanning the room, nose twitching at every corner. The demonstration of instinct and obedience had now become a life-saving intervention. The small child had guided them here, and the dog had executed a flawless follow-up, confirming the memory and revelations of the youngest witness in the case. Caleb Reese's voice broke through the storm outside as he was brought into custody, muttering protests that fell flat against the undeniable proof of his crimes. Ranger's ears twitched, growl low, signaling that while the immediate threat was secured, the investigation was far from over. Every move, every detail would be documented meticulously to ensure justice was fully served. Detective Harlan knelt next to Lily's father, examining him for signs of further injury. Bruises were evident, but miraculously, no life-threatening wounds remained. Harlan's trained eyes noted the patterns, recognizing signs of restraint and fear, confirming the man had been held against his will under threatening conditions. Lily clutched her father's hand, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, it's okay now," she whispered. Ranger nudged her gently, as if reinforcing the truth she had known all along. The child had remembered the right details, had recognized danger, and had helped guide her father back to safety. Claire Carter knelt beside Lily, hugging her tightly. "You were amazing," she whispered. "So brave, so smart." Lily hugged her rabbit tightly, eyes wide and shining, absorbing the affirmation, yet already sensing the relief that now surrounded her family. Detective Harlan called the team together. "Collect all evidence, mark it properly, and prepare statements," he instructed, voice calm but intense. "The dog and the child's testimony have led us here. We need to document everything for court. The rest of this case will be decided by law, but today we've done the impossible." Outside the warehouse, rain continued to fall, washing the grime from the building, but it could not wash away the tension, the fear, and the relief that had been condensed into these hours. Ranger remained at attention, loyal and vigilant, as officers prepared to transport Caleb Reese to the station for processing and interrogation. The father, reunited with his daughter, held her tightly. His gratitude was palpable, an emotional relief that echoed through the warehouse like the final notes of a symphony. The smallest witness and the trained K-9 had rewritten the narrative, transforming a 3-year-long nightmare into a tangible path toward justice. Lily looked up at Ranger, her small hand resting on the dog's head. "You helped," she whispered. Ranger's ears twitched, tail wagging gently as if acknowledging her thanks. In that moment, the bond between human and animal, child and protector, was undeniable. Detective Harlan exhaled, finally allowing himself to feel the weight of the resolution. 3 years of unanswered questions, fear, and investigation had converged in a single night. A child's memory, a dog's instincts, and the relentless pursuit of justice had restored a family and brought a criminal to account. But even as relief swept the warehouse, Detective Harlan knew that the courtroom drama was not over. Caleb Reese's arrest, while pivotal, was only the precursor to the legal reckoning awaiting him. And the court, now fully aware of the unprecedented testimony provided by a child and a K-9, would have to weigh the extraordinary evidence carefully, balancing intuition, instinct, and law. Lily hugged her father tightly, whispering once more, "We found you. I knew we would." Ranger sat quietly beside her, tail slowly wagging, vigilant and protective. The night had ended with the most unlikely of heroes guiding the path to justice, a 3-year-old girl, a German shepherd, and a locket that had carried secrets for far too long. The courtroom was packed. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and every seat in the gallery was filled. The tension that had gripped the city for 3 years had condensed into this final, decisive moment. Caleb Reese sat handcuffed at the defense table, his face pale, eyes darting nervously to every corner. For the first time, his arrogance was gone. The smirk that once defined him had vanished, replaced by a quiet terror. He knew the 3-year-long deception was over. Detective Mark Harlan stood quietly at the back, observing. The trial had already been unconventional, unprecedented even, but today would set the culmination of events into history. A 3-year-old's memory and a K-9's instincts had led them to the truth, uncovered a missing father, and provided indisputable evidence against a man who thought himself untouchable. The locket, now preserved as the central exhibit, gleamed under the courtroom lights, a symbol of hope, bravery, and revelation. Judge Ellen Whitmore, stern yet visibly moved, adjusted her glasses. "We will proceed," she announced, voice resonant. "The court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances of this case. We are here to ensure that justice is served based on the facts, testimony, and evidence presented." The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, the evidence is irrefutable. Lily Carter, age 3, has testified with clarity and precision. Ranger, the K-9, has demonstrated trained behavior consistent with detection of the victim's presence and recognition of danger associated with the defendant. The locket, discovered and verified, corroborates the child's account. Furthermore, physical evidence collected from the recovery site directly ties Caleb Reese to the unlawful restraint and concealment of the victim." The gallery whispered, awestruck. Even seasoned attorneys and law enforcement officers felt the weight of what was unfolding. A toddler and a dog had altered the course of a trial that could have been stalled by time, fear, and manipulation. Caleb Reese shifted in his seat, his hands shaking. His defense attorney whispered furiously, but every word seemed futile. Ranger, seated obediently near the witness box, growled softly, a warning and a reminder that instinct did not lie. Lily, sitting on her mother's lap, clutched her rabbit and the locket, eyes wide and unwavering, fully aware of the gravity of her presence. Judge Whitmore turned her gaze toward the child. "Lily, would you like to speak before the final proceedings?" The room fell silent. A 3-year-old's voice carried more weight than anyone anticipated. Lily took a deep breath, gripping her rabbit, and whispered, "Daddy, he's okay now. The bad man, he can't hurt us anymore." Gasps and murmurs swept the room. Claire Carter wiped tears from her eyes, clutching her daughter. Detective Harlan's chest tightened. So much had been resolved, yet every second still held tension. Caleb Reese's lips twitched, no words forming. The dog's low growl resonated, a tangible measure of the man's guilt. The prosecutor continued, packing slightly as if every step echoed the magnitude of the case. The defendant attempted to manipulate the system, evade justice, and conceal a crime of the most severe nature. The child's testimony, combined with Ranger's trained detection and the discovery of evidence directly linked to the defendant, leaves no doubt of his culpability. Caleb swallowed hard, voice barely audible. This is impossible. She's just a..." "Silence!" Judge Whitmore's gavel slammed down. "The court will not tolerate interruptions. The child's testimony is valid and corroborated by physical evidence. This proceeding continues in accordance with the law." Detective Harlan's eyes scanned the courtroom, taking in every reaction. The jury, attentive and focused, had watched the drama unfold. The discovery of the locket, the K-9's behavior, the child's precise memory. The combination of human and animal insight had created a narrative so compelling that even the most skeptical jurors could not deny its truth. Lily's father, seated beside his wife, held her hand tightly. His eyes, still bruised from the ordeal, glistened with gratitude and disbelief. "You were amazing," he whispered. "Both of you, Lily and Ranger. You saved me." Ranger's massive head rested gently on Lily's lap, tail wagging slowly. The dog had become more than evidence. He was a symbol of protection, instinct, and loyalty. He had led them to the truth, guided by the scent of justice and the subtle cues of fear that only a trained animal could detect. The prosecution presented the final evidence: photographs of the recovered locket, forensic analysis linking Caleb to the warehouse, and detailed accounts of Ranger's trained behavior. Each piece was meticulously laid out, creating a narrative that was impossible to dispute. The courtroom absorbed the weight of the story, every detail reinforcing the gravity of the crime and the heroism of those who uncovered it. Finally, the jury was instructed to deliberate. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving the Carter family, Detective Harlan, Ranger, and the prosecution team. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, every second stretching as the 3-year-old and the German Shepherd had transformed what could have been a routine trial into a historic and emotional demonstration of justice. Hours passed, every tick of the clock amplified the tension, and then the doors opened. The jury filed in, faces solemn but resolute. The foreperson stood, voice steady yet filled with gravity. "Your Honor, we have reached a verdict." The courtroom fell silent. Caleb Reese's hands shook. Ranger stiffened, alert and ready. Lily clutched her rabbit tightly, her mother's hands gripping her shoulders protectively. Detective Harlan held his breath. The foreperson's voice rang out clearly. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Caleb Reese, guilty on all counts: unlawful restraint, kidnapping, and attempted homicide." The room erupted. Claire Carter sobbed openly, tears mingling with relief. Lily's father embraced his daughter tightly, whispering words of thanks, gratitude, and disbelief. Ranger barked once, tail wagging, a simple yet profound acknowledgement of victory and truth. The court officers moved to take Caleb into custody, his expression blank, a hollow shadow of the man who had once believed himself untouchable. Judge Whitmore banged her gavel, restoring order. This court acknowledges the bravery, memory, and instincts that brought this case to justice. Let it be noted that the child, Lily Carter, and K-9 Ranger played an extraordinary role in uncovering the truth and protecting the victim. This is a testament to courage, vigilance, and the pursuit of justice. Detective Harlan exhaled deeply, the tension finally leaving his body. Years of investigation, months of uncertainty, and decades of dedication had converged in a courtroom where a child and a dog had rewritten the rules of evidence, memory, and instinct. Lily, perched on her mother's lap, looked up at Ranger, whispering softly, "Thank you, you found Daddy." Ranger's ears twitched, and he nudged her gently, as if acknowledging her gratitude. Outside the courthouse, the city felt alive with relief. Reporters documented every detail, headlines already forming. 3-year-old and K-9 uncover missing father, lead to conviction. The story would captivate hearts, inspire hope, and highlight the extraordinary ways courage and instinct can change lives. Lily's father held her close, voice trembling with emotion. "You were so brave, so very brave. I don't know what I would have done without you." Claire Carter hugged both her husband and daughter tightly, tears flowing freely. "You saved our family," she whispered. "All of you, Lily, Ranger, Detective Harlan, you saved us." Detective Harlan knelt beside Ranger, giving the massive dog a firm pat on the head. "Good work, boy. You were perfect." Ranger barked softly, tail wagging, as though understanding that justice had been served. Caleb Reese was led away, the gravity of his actions finally fully realized. He had underestimated the smallest witness, the most loyal protector, and the persistence of those seeking truth. The courtroom drama, suspense, and danger that had defined 3 years had ended. Justice, finally, had been delivered. Lily hugged her father tightly one last time, looking up at him with wide, shining eyes. "We found you, and he can't hurt us anymore," she whispered. Ranger nudged her gently, tail wagging, a silent guardian and hero. Detective Harlan exhaled again, the city's rain beginning to fall more lightly, washing the streets, but leaving the memories of fear, courage, and resolution etched forever in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. In that moment, the story closed, but its impact would ripple through time, a testament to the bravery of a 3-year-old, the instincts of a German shepherd, and the unyielding pursuit of justice.